Article is written by Erica Smiley. It's called The Racist Business Model Behind Uber and Lyft. The apps feed a false promise of stability to immigrants and people of color. Instead, drivers receive low pay and no benefits. Uber and Lyft want you to know they aren't racist. It's why Uber put up billboards all over the West Coast saying, if you tolerate racism, delete Uber. It's why Lyft is running ads featuring Maya Angelou's Lift Up Your Eyes poem over clips of black passengers enjoying their service. It's all to say we get it. We're woke. We think Black Lives Matter just like you do. We're with you in the struggle. Okay, Uber and Lyft, you want a seat at the anti-racism table? Let's talk about race. These powerful companies are already in a strong position to discuss it. In fact, they have one of the most diverse workforces in the United States. A UC Santa Cruz study found that in their hometown of San Francisco, 78% of app-based drivers are people of color, and 56% are immigrants. Wow, that's great that Uber and Lyft are providing so many job opportunities to people of color, but wait. That was only the first line in the survey. According to the same UC Santa Cruz survey, 71% of these app workers work 30 hours a week, and more than half work over 40 hours. Despite this, as much as 20% may earn $0 after expenses, and 15% are forced to rely on public assistance to get by. $0. The last workforce that was predominantly people of color that worked this hard for $0 was, well, let's just say it. It wasn't a great moment in our nation's history. So can we call Uber and Lyft's workforce diverse? Yes. But can we call it just? No, and here's why. Despite the anti-racist billboards and the Maya Angelou poems, these wealthy companies have built an entire business model on gaslighting people of color and exploiting them for cheap labor. When Uber and Lyft first started, they told drivers, and often still do, they could make up to $100,000 a year if they drove full-time. But as the industry became more competitive, Uber and Lyft began to demand as much as 20% of each ride, all while drivers were paying their own car expense. Just want to tell you that they're taking over 50% at the moment. 20%, those were the good times. All while drivers were paying their own car expenses. And when these apps realized that they needed larger fleets to compete, they started recruiting low-income, often immigrant drivers with false promises of the American dream. For example, even if you didn't have a car or credit score, Uber would set you up with a car lease. All you had to do was commit to making 150 to 200 rides a week for the company. Can't do it? No worries. Uber knows there are plenty of others for them to target, but you still have to pay that car lease Uber signed you up for. All too often, these apps are feeding the false promise of stable living to immigrants, of people of color. It's what driver activists like to call exploitation through innovation. California tech companies like Uber and Lyft have innovated or forcibly mutated the traditional model of employment into a more exploitative but flexible model than the one that existed previously. Unlike a traditional employer, Uber says you can work whenever you want, for however long you want, but Uber won't pay you for your car expenses and they won't give you benefits. Essentially, you are just self-employed, but with a tech giant skimming 20% off everything you make on your own. 20%? How about 50%? I think this is where the writer is misinformed. 50%. Here's the problem with this flexible model of unemployment. As we've seen, most gig drivers aren't working flexible hours. Again, 71% of drivers in Uber and Lyft hometown of San Francisco work 30 hours a week, and more than half work over 40 hours. And again, despite working full-time hours, this diverse population isn't getting full-time pay or benefits for that matter. More than 1/5 do not have health insurance, and as most uninsured folks will tell you, life isn't exactly flexible when you don't have health care. The lack of health care, the bad pay, the fact that 59% of app-based food delivery drivers said they could not save enough to handle a $400 emergency expense, according to the USC Santa Cruz study, led to a perfect storm when the coronavirus hit. A follow-up to that study found that 37% of those surveyed lost 100% of their pay, as Uber and Lyft were their only source of income, and there was no way for many drivers to collect unemployment when the shutdown started, as they weren't technically employees thanks to Uber and Lyft. How would Maya Angelou feel about all of this? Should she be okay with exploiting people of color for cheap labor? Would she be okay with leaving them out to dry in a pandemic? As a black woman, I'm pretty confident in saying that she would not be okay with this. Thankfully, we have the opportunity to change this racist, exploitative model for good, and it starts in Uber and Lyft's home state of California. California voters can redefine app-based employment this November and help countless POC drivers get the pay and the benefits they earn by voting no on Proposition 22. Californians, you have to vote no on Proposition 22, please, to make sure that this greed, this type of behavior ends. No on Prop 22 would partially overturn AB 5, a California law that expands the definition of employment to include app-based workers so that they could receive full-time benefits for full-time work. If passed, Proposition 22 would permanently exempt app-based companies like Uber and Lyft from providing benefits to their drivers, even those who work full-time hours for the app. Uber and its allies has already spent a record-breaking nearly $200 million on lifting up Proposition 22, all while their drivers are struggling to get through the pandemic. So despite all the anti-racist advertisements and the fact we care about our drivers' talking points, their priorities are clear. Keep our POC and immigrant drivers in a constant state of financial insecurity and protect our profit model at all costs. And myself being a voice for drivers on YouTube, I can confirm that. That's what I hear every single day. But Uber and Lyft's priorities aren't the priorities of working people of color, of immigrants, or of any decent human being who believes in equal pay for equal work. Don't let them gaslight you into thinking otherwise. Powerful, powerful article. I appreciate Erica Smiley from The Guardian telling it as it is. Now, I want to give my shout out to my sponsor, KOVA, KOVER. They are a gig protection plan starting at $7 a month. They cover all of these gig companies. You basically have your auto insurance, your health insurance, and you go out there and get yourself a gig protection plan. Because what happens very often in this game, in the gig game, is that the companies deactivate you over wrongful reports, and it's hard to get back into the game. So KOVA has a legal arm called LegalRideshare. They send out the letters. They get you reinstated in the game. They also kick in and cover 80% of your lost income if you end up in hospital or if your car's in the workshop. Now, their partner, LegalRideshare, legalrideshare.com, they're up in Chicago, right? They cover injury, property damage to your car, or wage losses. They will handle the insurance claim with the insurance company and get you the max amount of dollars, right? So yeah, call them here. They specialize in rideshare. That's their legal focus. They also have partnered with KOVA on deactivation, as I mentioned, right? KOVA has retained LegalRideshare to write letters for its members demanding that gig companies promptly reactivate your account. So the combination of both, those are two good addresses to know if something happens, God forbid. Please comment on this article. Do you believe it's accurate? I'd love to hear your feedback. The title again is The Racist Business Model Behind Uber and Lyft. Have a great day and please drive safe.